Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Purple Science Podcast. I'm Srishti Chipde, your fellow science admirer and student explorer. So, there's this one thing that everybody will agree with me on. During our student lives, we get a lot of unsolicited advice from all directions, from all kinds of people, and although most of it might be unnecessary, most of it might be confusing whether we should take it or skip it. But there are some pieces of advice that are so significant in our lifetime that shape our careers, that shape the way we live, and that stay with us forever. One such advice that somebody gave me during my undergrad was to talk to my seniors always, no matter at what point of my life am I at. And although there is a larger meaning to that, it is extremely related when you are studying. If nothing else, talking to your seniors will really help you understand what step to take next. Whether it is a story of success or failure, whether these are motivating or demotivating, I can assure you that talking to your seniors will help you a lot into decision making, because it's very possible that 90% of the things that you are going to go through and struggle with, they have already gone through and they have tried multiple ways of tackling these situations. I was very lucky to have amazing seniors who always guided me through their journeys very candidly and very honestly. But I think this should not be a matter of luck at all. Everybody deserves a sincere, honest, and clear glimpse into what your student life will look ahead of you. So I brought in my senior, my guide, and a very amazing friend of mine for a heart to heart that I think will be very, very useful to all of you, as much as it has been useful to me. I'm sure you'll take away something from this. So, without any further delay, let's get to the episode. You know that feeling, first of all, that when you are pursuing a degree or doing a course, you don't really focus on what the degree or the institute is giving you. Instead, you are just thinking about, what can I do best and how can I, surpass my peers and all of that. Because that happens to me and people around me all the time. And then once we are out of college or out of the degree, we're like, okay, but what has this given me? What will this degree do to me? That is such a common feeling that I have been hearing a lot about. But anyway, moving to the question itself, you are about to finish your master's, and now that it's almost over, do you think that you were prepared for it? And if so, did you get enough exposure in your undergrad as well as during your master's degree that would have helped you in this journey, or did help eventually in this journey?
First thing, my master is over. Like I've defended my thesis. There is no more that one safety net. So a very funny thing, I really wanted to cling to this hope every day that I've spent after coming back. Today we have practicals, today we have thesis defense. Even till the last day, you are still in college. But then once that thesis defense is over, your master's is over. That is, trust me, a really, really scary feeling. So, yes, one, my master's is over. And speaking of whether I was prepared for it or not, see, nobody is honestly. If you won't believe me when I say this, I landed up in BSc because I was actually gonna give my second attempt of NEET. I did not even know that I will be pursuing MSc or masters or not. So I just landed up here because I wanted to attempt NEET second time, like most of the people land up in life sciences for the same thing. And BSc was done, then beach mein there was a pandemic and all. So I just went with the flow, honestly. So I can't say that I was ever ready for it or not. Just things kept happening, but it was great. And speaking of exposure, yes, if the pandemic had not happened, things would have been really different. Probably I would have left BSc in the middle. Maybe, maybe. Nobody knows. I'm speaking for my entire batch and most of the people that I know and who have similar opinions.
I'd really
Can
like
you
you to
hear?
elaborate on that statement you just made. Why would you leave BSc in the middle?
See, because one, the university, you know the problems with our university in general, right? Like
Yeah,
writing all
yeah, of
those
course.
long answers, a bit non-updated kind of syllabus that we follow. So first semester and second semester were like, "See, I want to give NEET again. So see, this is happening, and I should not waste time. What if I am not able to clear NEET in the second attempt? So I'll at least have the BSc ka degree going on." So that's how I landed up. And if I had taken BSc seriously only, maybe I would have opted for other good opportunities. Like one of our students went to TIFR for a summer program. Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Yogita went for TIFR's ka summer program, and that was kind of an eye opener for me because I realized that there are opportunities in this thing also. So I was really like distracted during
Uh-huh.
that phase because I want to give NEET again, and this is good.
Yeah, that way pandemic did good to us. It opened our eyes and we had enough time to like explore other things.
Right. So my interest in this degree was in masters only. Personally speaking, in my case, if I was interested in BSc already, I would have explored opportunities like summer internships and all, and that would have given a great exposure. But no worries. You always have that option. Like, if not today, tomorrow, you can always explore. Some or the other day, everybody has that turning point and eye opener things in their 5 years career. See, I did not get anything personally because first year I was not interested. But yes, people can get. There are many government summer internship programs that run every year that are specifically there for BSc students. I think JNCSR is one program. Jawaharlal Nehru University's summer internship program is one. They also call it SRFP, Summer Research Fellowship Program, if I'm not wrong. And Indian Academy of Sciences ka summer research program. CCMB has its own summer research program. Everybody has, and these opportunities are available right from your first year. So exposure of a national institute can be achieved by these things. And speaking of college level exposure, then that is difficult for BSc first year, but second, third year, one can explore in the nearby areas, nearby labs that they know. Find internships in every nearby. Like for Nagpur, we have NEERI and many other small labs who are now providing these opportunities. So yeah, that can be done.
Yeah, but this sad story really remains the same that most of us got into BSc as a result of the setback
Exactly.
from NEET by
Yes.
default and not really because of
Everybody.
choice.
Trust me, 9 out of the 10 people I think land up in BSc because NEET nahi hua.
So, but the thing is that most of the students that we know of, even our peers, they're not really privileged to choose their colleges or degrees because they go through all of these failures and then they take up whatever is easily available to them. Do you think that this is true and if this is a problem at all?
Right. It is really true, very true. One thing, and yes, it is a problem because one group of people that you will see land up there because they were not able to go to medicine. One group of people you will see those who land up there because "Oh, my friend did. I don't know what to do, so I am doing BSc." Very few people you will find, just one or two, who genuinely knew from 12th standard ki I want to go in life sciences. Very few people, and those are only able to make something good out of it. Because half of the people, if you don't know the purpose of why you have landed up in this degree, I don't think you can make the most out of it. And yes, something really needs to be done for this. Nowadays, yes, people are being aware of BSc or life sciences or plain science degrees as a good career option. Many people are coming to that. Like I've heard a few people who have just cleared their 12th standard who were talking to me, and I have seen that they say ki we want to do BSc. I was like, this is so rare to hear. Ki I want to do BSc. Having that clarity is a privilege.
It's really great to hear that. Even I haven't heard from anyone yet.
Right, right. Very few people have found, but yes, it has started.
Can you also tell us like the what was your master's program all about, your the general structure of your program, and also like what do you like, what do you not like, and would rather skip kind of a thing?
Before masters, there are many exams. Nowadays, there are many exams like GATB, IIT JAM, TIFR, JJ Bliss, and all. I don't think this was there at least 5 years ago. I think most of the people used to get into masters or on basis of their marks in BSc, but now they also have entrance exams. So I also gave many entrance exams, and I could not clear the entrance exam by 4 marks. So that was one very big setback. But our college, you are from the same college. Hislop is a great, great college to be at. Whatever frustration you get because of the university, Hislop helps to tone it down a bit because it's a great place to stay. Hislop lets you explore other opportunities. They let you work on your projects. So that is why college, yes, great. Our college is great. And so I think when I started masters, Sunita ma'am told me to write a book chapter on the ongoing projects, that which is published by now. I think last year only it got published. So my masters actually began with writing that book chapter and not anything else. But picking in general of a master's program, it's not going to be as vague as a bachelor's program, because in bachelor's you have other subjects like chemistry, this, that. Masters may your curriculum focuses solely on biotechnology. So whatever sub papers you have, whatever different papers you have, they are only different subjects of biotechnology, not like BSc, because in BSc you have 2 papers of biotech, 2 papers of some minor subject, 2 papers of that subject, and so on. In masters, you have all papers of biotechnology only. So it's more of a focused kind of program. And the elements that I would like to add, see, there's nothing that I think I would skip from the program, because masters has others in fourth semester, at least in our university. In other universities, it's different. In fourth semester or in first year, you have subjects like research methodology and statistics and all. So the master's curriculum, anyways, is designed in a way that there is nothing to skip. And speaking of something that I can add, maybe every biotech program should have compulsory in-depth bioinformatics, since it is gaining a lot of attention these days and is required in every field of biotech. So maybe adding a bit more of bioinformatics can be really effective.
Would you like to elaborate on what was so frustrating about the university?
The university does not have an updated syllabus. One, they are still following really old syllabus, because I remember comparing this syllabus to some of the other universities. The syllabus of Pune University is excellent. They have subjects like bio entrepreneurship, they have subjects like research writing, which we do not have. We do not have bio entrepreneurship, which they really should be adding. It's an old curriculum. If you go through, I don't like the exam system also, because it requires you to like write long, long, huge answers, which do not even make sense sometimes. Like if you're for our university, if the question that you have been asked is about some sort of cellular process, our university requires us to start the answer from cell is the smallest unit of life. Why? Why can't you have just why can't you just mark on the pointers and give whatever 16, 20 marks the question is? Well, BSc is, yes, a theoretical degree in itself, and writing is really important. But see, it might, and we don't even know if the examiner is checking our answer in that much detail. I've heard people say this about our university, that I wrote a song in the middle just to make the answer lengthy, and I still got the marks. I have a master's friend who did this in third semester. Actually wrote a song in the middle. 2, 3 pages are songs, and yet she has scored good enough marks.
Wow.
So for a student who knows these things, for a student who knows that you are grading songs and correct answers equally, it's very unfair and frustrating. If somebody is getting marks on songs, why should I write the correct answer? I'll also write songs.
True.
So that is one big problem I have with the university. Curriculum is not updated. They really need to change the way they frame an exam paper, question paper. The student should feel worth enough to write that answer. It should be challenging for the brain. Like, you
Right.
won't believe this. You can take this off the record if you want. One of the questions that I wrote an answer to in the master's degree program was, what are the elaborate answer on parts of a computer? I actually wrote output, input devices, keyboard, mouse, this, that. Is this a question you should be giving to a master's level student?
In
That's disrespectful
biotechnology.
to the degree. Yes. You have one paper of bioinformatics, bioethics, and biostatistics. Second question number two for 16 marks is what is a computer and elaborate on parts of a computer. Seriously.
Thank you so much for
So
highlighting
yeah,
all
that
of
is one
that.
big problem I have.
Yeah, thank you for being so candid. But apart from these, the exam system throughout the thing also,
Mhm.
did you face any other challenges that could have been improved? And now that you're going out, going to different institutes, you see that some things are obvious there, which you absolutely struggled with here.
Right. So the biggest problem that I would highlight is having theoretical papers in your fourth semester of master's degree. Your master's degree is framed that first semester you have all four theoretical subjects, second also, third also. Fourth semester you should solely be working on your thesis. That is what I think, and that is what maximum universities do. You go to ICERS, they also have one entire blank semester for thesis. Like all the 600, 700 marks that are there for the thesis only. For our university, you have 100 marks on the thesis and 400 marks on, like 100 marks each for four different theoretical papers. How do you expect a student to do a dissertation project full time along with four good subjects? And that too, when there is no need. For last semester should be kept blank, because we are already done going through our thesis project. We have written a thesis of about 70 to 100 pages, and again we will come back and study for four subjects in depth for, and we'll write question papers of 80 marks. We'll again give practicals, again give some different seminars that are not your thesis presentations. We have a seminar which is not a thesis presentation. Why have all these things? Fourth semester should only solely be thesis. Thesis, your project, your thesis defense, that's it. No paper should be there. Which is why I also got judged in CCMB for this. Because many people were like, how can your university do this? You are also giving papers, you are also doing dissertation. You get judged outside for this.
That's really sad. But apart from that, apart from the university, do you think in general it is intimidating to get
Mhm.
research internships and fellowships as a BSc or MSc student, unlike or as
It's not,
compared to
honestly.
students of premium institutes like ISC, ISERS, IITs? Because I mean, ideally, the criteria should be and is the same for everybody. But in reality, is it the same for you as it is for the students in ISERS and IITs?
It might not be, because the ICER internships that are there, ICER summer internships, I also remember specifically mailing a few scientists about this. They sometimes accept that most, in fact, if you go to the ICER summer internships page, they have a different section for inter ICER students. Like somebody from ICER Bhopal will go to ICER Pune. Mostly they end up filling their labs with students from another ICER only, which is fair for them to some extent also. See, because as a student also, an ICER would prefer another ICER student so as to maintain the quality, because these guys have entered the ICER, these guys have entered the premium institute by passing some or the other entrance test, which was a necessary criteria. So it sometimes, I think, is a disadvantage for us that we are not in any of the premium institutes. But see, you have to keep trying. You cannot just say that I am not from a premium institute, so I won't apply. You keep trying everywhere. Some are, and you hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It is difficult, it is intimidating, but if you have had good enough, at least some project in college, some college level project, some basic workshops that you have been to. For example, I'll say cloning right now after CCMB. I realized this cloning and PCR are really essential techniques. So if you have had at least a little experience of a workshop, maybe a small project in college, yes, that would help. And then it would also not make it intimidating for somebody to apply.
So let's say for somebody who did not end up in the lottery, who came to BSc by default because of their setback in need, for them, what do you suggest? How do you
Mhm.
suggest they pick up, and how do they, enter the actual market and get all of these opportunities? What should they be doing?
One, first of all, start applying for all of the summer internships, small workshops, 1 month, 2 months, 10 days. I strictly used to do this in my BSc. It was a habit. So most in the morning when I wake up, 10 o'clock se I would go through every college, every premium institute's website.
Ashish, I'm gonna interrupt you there a little bit. I agree that they should apply to all of these opportunities, but even before that, how should they be prepared for this? What can they do in order to be eligible for all of this? Because there's no point if you are not prepared, and even if you get that opportunity, then it won't be worth it, right?
Mm.
So, can you start from there?
Uh, Reading some recent scientific articles, because they are, if at all somebody is gonna all of these things require you to write an SOP, and having that knack for science and reading good recent research papers and everything, basically knowing what all research is going on and being able to put yourself in that SOP such that most of these things have a word limit. So you should be able to express yourself correctly in that word limit. So a BSc student should try and express their interest in a way such that it is appealing to somebody that they can hire you. So writing SOPs, getting used to writing SOPs, knowing all of the scientific techniques in detail. In my BSc, I did not know the importance of a PCR. I used to think it's just a small piece, it's a small thing. But when I actually did PCR, and then I realized the vast theory that goes behind it. We don't know this when we are in BSc. And if you know that vast theory, it is easy for you to write an SOP. And yes, the person who's going to read the SOP would know that you understand what they are doing, what they are trying. And when somebody is applying for a summer internship, go through the scientist profile, go through the lab's profile, go through what work they are doing, try to read their papers, and then you can convey in a word that how I am interested in your work. So they need to know that you have read about their work in some or the other way.
Yes, it is. It is a great advice to the beginners. One more thing, I completely understand extra efforts, and that's what we always should be doing. As you said, just because we are not in premium institutes doesn't mean we'll just sit down and be like, oh, I won't be able to go anywhere with this. Instead of that, I mean, I sure agree to that, but also, shouldn't we be, or shouldn't the institutes be also training students to be in the industry, to be in the market, to be in academia as a part of the curriculum? Do you think that happens enough, or is it just completely based on your efforts?
It is, it is the reason behind saying it that it is based on your efforts in the first place is that your college is not probably doing enough for it. But then when I look at this thing, I also understand the college's point of view. For an college or an academic institute, their main target is to get you through the theory. Yes, they should be putting some extra efforts on training you for industry and like real time academia. I think that will be possible after complete implementation of NEP. It has good enough provisions for that. But the curriculum that we have been following till now forces an academic institute to, remain bound in that theory only. So that is it. Sometimes it happens like the institute wants to do something for you, but they are not able to because they have to go with the guidelines of the university. Which is why we students have to put all the extra efforts of keeping a watch on the websites and keeping a watch on what workshops are going on. Because your college won't say no to you for to go to a workshop, but even economically it is not possible for a college, for a normal tier 3 college, to have a regularly ongoing tissue culture facility or cloning facility or industry whatever techniques are required in industrial, having those things going on a tier 3 college on regular basis, is not possible economically, because these things require really expensive equipments which are not granted to a college. It's not, even for the government, it's not possible to give this many instruments and resources to all colleges. So they will try to train you maximum in theory. They'll try to do whatever is in their hands. Rest of the efforts the student has to put.
Because you mentioned NEP and because you mentioned some of the problems that NEP aims at addressing, would you like to talk about it? What are you really looking forward to, and which provisions are you most excited about, especially related to undergrad education and research development? What do you think you are excited about the most?
Right. So, as I mentioned before this, NEP brings into picture a 4-year BSc program wherein they are trying really hard to focus on the skills part of a research degree. Now, that is something that is really, really exciting because it includes a dissertation in the BSc 4 degree itself. 4 years degree itself, which is so that would sort of eliminate the requirement of a master's degree because if you get an honors 4 years honors degree, one, it's easy for people to go abroad because till now having a 3 years BSc was a problem for everybody to go abroad. What they used to do is they used to do a one MSc here and then with a 5-year degree, 3+2, they used to go outside and do another MSc. So if a 4-year BSc program, which is now NEP's feature, now if it gets incorporated, it's easy for people to go outside. Two, 3 years of BSc is actually a very, short period. First year, everybody is like scared, what's going on, this, that, you don't know what to do. Second year, you start liking your degree, and by the time you actually decide that, yeah, this is what I want to do, BSc is over. So 4-year BSc or and NEP would actually bring the interest of people in life sciences. They'll probably also make people end up there for going in life sciences and not because they could not do medicine. See, I haven't read the NEP for college level education yet. I
Hmm.
have been reading the document since quite some time. I have read it for primary education. So I don't know if there is any really special provision for undergrad and post graduation education, but the 4-year degree, like I said, will also allow people to leave the degree at any point. Like first year you can leave, second also, third also, and you will go out with something. Like first year if you are leaving, you will go out with a certificate. Second, if you are leaving, you will go out with a diploma. So nobody will be actually wasting a year. There is no time would be wasted. All the time will be effectively utilized because since at least within a year you will figure out that you don't want to do this, you can leave by taking a certificate and figure out what you have to do instead. If you leave with a diploma, you can see what you can do after the diploma. So I think time won't be wasted anymore because I have seen people who do a 3 years BSc and then do any random Python or some course and get into an IT job. So they actually wasted the 3 years of their life and a seat for somebody else.
Right, right. So if not getting the degree was stopping people from dropping off on a school degree, on a college degree, just because they had to go through it and they needed that degree, then this is great because then they can,
Right.
if they get what they wanted to, they are out. That's I think that's good for both the parties.
Right, right. And a 4-year BSc or any implementation of NEP would somehow try to bridge the gap between the premium institutes and normal colleges. Because if you see ICERS and other people have like a 4-year program, they have integrated BSMS programs. So I think that gap will now be filled because everybody, it's harmonious for the country. Everybody will have a 4 years BSc degree. So that gap will be bridged.
And I think NAP also addresses or highlights the importance of student exchange programs, and that will be more accessible in the coming times. But from your experience, what is your take on student exchange programs? I mean, according to you, does working in different labs and different institutes really broaden the horizons and is more beneficial than sticking to one institute as it is sold or as it should be ideally?
I'm not aware about the exchange programs that happen between countries. I'm not. But speaking on undergrad level, going for summer trainings or going for your thesis projects outside of your institutes, yes, it's a great opportunity because you get to see how people are working, what is their flow of work, and how they try to optimize which is something that you cannot experience in college. And once you have that experience, if you bring back that experience to your college on how to optimize, see, going outside of your institute actually changes your perspective towards the project. My perspective towards science is now really different than what it was before CCMB. So going to such institutes makes you think differently. It changes your thought process for a problem, how you approach a scientific problem, and bringing back that expertise to your college again would, that that exchange of knowledge will be really efficient. What gap you have here, maybe you can try to fill it from the knowledge that you got from there.
Nice, nice. That's true. And I'm very excited to hear all about your experience at CCME, and I'll come to that. But before that, especially for the undergrads listening to this, and all of my peers had this question all the time. Can you explain what a dissertation project is to them, and why is it an important part of the master's program?
Okay. So a dissertation project, one is a firstly very easy words. It's a part of your curriculum. Two, it is designed for you to get like a trailer of what's going to be next. Because when you are in college, you are not working dedicatedly towards one objective. You are doing practicals for which are in general to you. You are learning techniques. When you go to a dissertation program, you learn why you were learning those techniques. In college, you just learn a technique. You just know what is PCR and what is gel electrophoresis. But when you go to a dissertation program, you realize ki why there is a need of doing PCR, or why there is a need for doing a gel electrophoresis. So having a dissertation program is the perfect cherry on the cake, where you realize the entire importance and the purpose of your degree, why you were doing this and how it is done outside the world. So dissertation program is really necessary for that.
Perfect, perfect. So on that note, we would love to hear all about your experience at CCME, about CCMB, of course, and what are some key learnings, what could have been better. Can you give us a brief about that?
Definitely. Okay. So coming to CCMB, first of all, for everybody who's in life sciences, I am telling you, CCMB is a heaven for somebody who loves biology. It's a 22-year-old institute, and one of a kind of institute in our country which has all the facilities in-house, literally all facilities. CCMB has two different imaging facilities. One is basic, where you get fluorescence and confocal microscopes. One is advanced imaging facility, where they even have an in-house atomic force microscope, in-house SEM, in-house TEM. Everything. You want sequencing? There are two different labs of sequencing in CCMB. One does it by Sanger method, the old one. One is also next generation sequencing. They have microarray, they have NMR, spectroscopy. You name a technique, and that is there in-house in CCMB. So the exposure that you get there for biotechnology and molecular biology, excellent, excellent. Literally not a single thing that I know about CCMB that goes outside for processing. They have animal house facility which has all disease mouse models. They have in-house liquid nitrogen. They try to many PIs in CCMB have designed their own plasmids, which are available on AdGene and everything. So a plasmid that is constructed by somebody in CCMB is probably being used anywhere in the world right now. And hence, of course, now having people in such a facility might also be equally like great and intelligent. And yes, they are. Most of them are. Many of them are. Every PI is a Sir Ramanujan fellow. Every PI has been abroad for quite some time. So, and the projects that they are doing here also. Like, see, if you go, I don't know about other institutes, but they have like divisions. For example, NIRI in Nagpur has different divisions like health, toxicity, this, that. CCMB does not have anything like that. They just have an open ground. If you go to CCMB's website, you will just find the name of a PI. There is no division. Also, I heard CCMB is one of the place where somebody is working, where a PI, her name is Pavitra, she's working on 3D cell culture and organoids. Now that is something really, really advanced that I don't know how many people are working in India on 3D cell culture. And another PI that I know, Aishwarya, she's working on axon regeneration. Aishwarya's lab is the only lab in India working on axon regeneration, and worldwide also there are only 7 labs. She's one of them. So that all that exposure you will get in CCMB. Great, great place. Speaking of my project, I did my project under guidance of Jyotsna Dhawan. Jyotsna is the daughter of Satish Dhawan. He's a very prominent figure in Indian space sciences. And Jyotsna's work was always on muscle cell cohesions. Giving a small idea about what was my thesis project. If everyone remembers, myotube is a final structure of a skeletal muscle. So on this myotube, there is a small satellite cell is present, which is arrested in quiescence. Basically, whenever we have a small injury, like skeletal muscles go through a lot of wear and tear. So whenever there is an injury, these satellite cells get activated and they go and repair the injury. So Jyotsna's lab or muscle cell quiescence focused on the fact that suppose there is an injury and the satellite cell fails to leave quiescence, then the injury won't be repaired, and your that tissue would go under necrosis and all such conditions, or basically a degenerative disease. That is one pathway. And if there is no injury and still the satellite cell keeps on dividing, there is no need for repair and yet the satellite cell keeps on dividing, then there are tumor like conditions, cancerous conditions. So Jyotsna's lab worked on the pathways that lead a cell to either leave quiescence or stay in quiescence, basically. So I read about this before applying there, and I got a call from one of the PhD students from her lab, and she took like a proper interview for an hour or so, wherein she asked me everything about what I have done in college, what I plan to do, and everything. And then one fine day, she mailed me back that yes, we are okay, you are selected, and you come for dissertation program from so and so. So there was one gene that was involved in keeping the cell in quiescence. This was the hypothesis of the lab, and I am giving this in very layman terms. My thesis project was actually deleting a few domains of this gene and seeing what how it affects the quiescence. So if these genes are responsible for keeping the cell in quiescence, then deleting them would lead the cell to leave quiescence. This was the whole theme of our lab. But then there are many other labs also that I saw. Somebody used to work on zebrafish. Megha Kumar, yeah, Megha Kumar. She used to work on zebrafish, developmental biology. Again, excellent facility. And neuro also, there are two different divisions, two different buildings actually. There are some people who are in the different building who are working, most of them are working on neuro related things. Neuro or also CCMB is one of the place which has all three biosafety level labs, BSL 1, 2, 3. Most of the institutes, I think, do not even have three. BSL 3 facility is very rare. CCMB also has that. And what else do I have to tell about CCMB? Yeah, so in my initial days in CCMB, I used, okay, so this is really funny. See, all of us, we know what is an inoculating loop, right? All of us streak bacterial plates with those. So I went to CCMB and I saw something that looked like an inoculating loop, but it did not have a loop. It had something like a scraper. And I used to think in my first week, ki, how do they inoculate with this? How do they do this? Later on, I realized that these people don't use a loop. They just take a random microtip, pick up the colony, streak it with the microtip, and throw it. They don't have an inoculating loop. What I was looking at was a cell scraper. So many such things used to happen because the way of working is really different in these institutes, which is why I also said that they change your perspective, they change your thought process towards the scientific problem. So that is one thing that I would always appreciate about CCMB, that it has completely changed the way I look at a scientific problem, and it was really necessary. Anything else that you would like to know about CCMB?
I think more about your personal experience, like what were you working on at Hislop, whatever was available there. I mean, I know that we do not have unlimited facilities like CCME does, but and we have to, well, tweak our projects according to that. But what were the conditions then, and compared to that, how was your experience here? So what is new? What are some differences that you felt? And again, does it matter like where a student comes from in respect to the readiness of doing a project at CCMB, like with your experience? For example, did you feel a gap between I mean yourself and somebody that might have come from ISER or something?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. There is a huge gap between me and somebody who came from ICER, because the other person who used to work in our lab, she was a B Farm graduate from BITS Pilani. And BITS again also is a premium institute. So even during her B Farm, she had very well handled cell lines and everything. She had a mini project on effect of some drug on renal cells. And it was a good project. She had already done a lot of Western blotting, a lot of cell culture, which I never got to do in BSc or even in my master's. So, and yeah, in CCMB, interns and dissertation students are not allowed in the cell culture facility. The facility is excellent, brilliant, but they don't even want to take a chance that a desiccant will mess up something and work of the entire institute goes down the drain. So the interns are not even allowed there in the cell culture facility. So for somebody who has done cell culture in college, yes, they do have an upper hand, because if your PI is working on cell culture and your PI knows that yes, you have some experience, then at a times they bet on you. They will take your guarantee that you won't mess up other people's work in the cell culture facility. And there were a few dissertation students that I knew who had access to tissue culture facility. Like you have to do biometrics to get inside. And I could not do that because I do not have any cell culture experience. So that is one thing, yes, which is where ICER students have an upper, ICER and other premium institute students have an upper hand. But it's okay. Like if you are ready to learn, they can also bet on you. If you are good enough, if you have that knack and you have that much dedication, then your PI will bet on you. They will get you inside the cell culture facility and they'll teach you everything. My project, I think I have told you in layman terms what I worked on. Mostly, I used to run like, see, for example, in college, in all the 5 years of BSc, MSc combined, the number of electrophoresis gels that we ran as a batch, I ran more 3 times more gels in one day alone in CCMB. So that is one huge difference. You get really quick on calculations for a PCR. PCR is such an important technique. Everybody is doing it, and it's also a really powerful technique. Like I deleted an entire domain of a gene using PCR. So till now I did not know the impact and the power of PCR. Now I know how great it is. Like each one of us used to do PCR. I used to do overlap extension PCR. My lab mate used to do site-directed mutagenesis by PCR. People in other labs that I knew used to do gradient PCRs and whatnot. So everybody used to do it for a different purpose, but everybody used to do a PCR. So I realized how important that was. I ran n number of DNA gels. I also saw one very funny DNA gel where the DNA ran back. It ran back to the positive electrode, and none of us could figure out why. Who did this? We tried our levels best to figure out what could have possibly happened, but none of us could really come to one concrete conclusion. So that was also a great experience. And what else did I do? Bacterial culture. I did a lot of bacterial culture. I did plasmid isolations, a lot of on two different levels. See, I did not know this in college that you do two different types of plasmid isolation. One is just there to send it for sequencing. The purpose of that isolation is to send it for sequencing. But when you have to use that plasmid to edit a cell line, then you have to do a different type of plasmid isolation. So all these things I got to know there, and I got to know a lot about cloning, because till now rDNA technology or recombinant DNA technology was something restricted to, restriction, digestion, ligation, transformation. That's it. There I realized what the amount of logic that goes behind each one of these steps. Your plasmid is designed thinking about the end goal of the experiment. It is not just randomly designed ki we want this site, we want this, that. Every restriction site in that plasmid is designed keeping in mind the end goal of cell culture. So that is how thought process gets changed. Because you cannot like randomly cut a DNA, place it into another and just transform. That you have to think that your plasmid will be transcribed into what protein will come out of it, then where will that protein go and localize. So all these factors affect the starting one PCR. Now this was the kind of exposure and the kind of knowledge that I could not get here.
Awesome. I'm going to be a little cheeky and ask you what is next? What are you planning on doing next? And well,
God. Oh my God. Mhm.
no, because I think during our masters and there's always this thing where after till 12th you just go on shifting and then you have a existential question, but then you get somewhere, then BSc, then MSc, and then the obvious next is PhD, but then it's not the same, right?
Right.
It's a whole different, it's a whole new life. So I want you
Right,
to
right.
like elaborate on that feeling that it's not the obvious next, and what are the challenges that MSc graduates actually face?
Um, Speaking of the current scenario that we have here, on my last day in CCMB, I said this to my PhD guide, like the PhD person whose project that I was working on. I said this to her that it's really scary. I am going out with this dissertation project now, and I am just a MSc candidate in a pool of MSc candidates. So she laughed off for some time, and then I asked her, I was like, what happened? She was like, what do you think will happen after your PhD? I am doing my PhD, and after the PhD, I'll just be another PhD candidate in a pool of PhD candidates. So then I was like, okay, now this is going to happen with everybody. You have to decide. In my MSc first year, I think I had decided that no, I won't pursue a PhD immediately. I'll take some time. But then CCMB experience was really good, and I think that yes, maybe I will do a PhD in coming few days. I would be excited to. Another reason, if you want to stick to academia, if you want to stick to government academia, PhD is mandatory. Like, there's no other option. Just on MSc, I really don't think you will get a good, high paying job. Even after PhD, now this is a huge comparison that I always make. People of my age who did BTech and engineering are probably earning 60, 70,000 per month by now, average. And even after doing a PhD, I would still be stuck on 50,000 per month. That is a brutal truth. Even in industry. So if you go to industry as a PhD candidate also, you will still be paid less. You have to struggle everywhere. May it be a government institute, government research institute, a private research lab, industry, anywhere. You go there with a degree, rest of the struggle, the ladders you have to climb on your own. And now those are the decisions that you have to take timely. That what is the technique that I like? Where is my expertise? I can do this, I can do that. All of that has to be done on time, and there is no easy way to get there.
How do you stay motivated with all of that? I mean, I know that you always highlight all of these challenges and everything, but you never say that I'm tired of doing research or that's something I would not like to do and explore something else. You absolutely love doing it. So how do you stay motivated for that?
So the reason being that again, the people who are earning 60, 70,000 per month are doing the same job every day. Same job, same computer, same place, same thing every day. Speaking of our fields, life sciences, we are failing every day, but we are failing for a different reason. Like today, my PCR failed because because primer nahi gaya. Tomorrow, my PCR will probably fail because I forgot to add the template. At least your reason for failing every day is different. So that is how you slowly go towards success. But you are working every day. Every day there is a new reason you fail. Every day there is a new reason you succeed. You have to think that why this failed. Then tomorrow you don't do that. but then you fail because of some other reason. That whole process is really fun and interesting, at least to me. So that is what keeps me motivated.
That's really inspiring, actually, Ashlesha. And the thing is that it's very easy, especially in PhD programs, it is very easy to lose sight of your initial excitement for science and the fact that you loved science so much and you wanted to make an impact in the field. But then eventually, a day after day and experiment after experiment, it's easy to lose sight of that. Um, do you think that there is something extra that we can do for that to not happen, and then um, maybe facilitate conversations with the PhD graduates and undergrads so they have better idea of what they are getting into and what they must be preparing themselves for?
See, even after the experience of every PhD candidate is going to be different. For somebody who had to unfortunately do it for like 9 to 12 years, listening to them might make you feel like I'll never do a PhD. But then listening to somebody who could easily do it in 3 years will make you feel like, yeah, I can do this. Now, so every time you talk to a PhD person, since their experiences differ, your feeling for a PhD will also differ. So yes, talking to people, yes, it is a good idea, but then you should make sure that you are talking to both sides of the PhD, like the good side, the bad side, and then decide whether you are ready to tolerate whatever might happen to you. You might go to a PhD and see, because it also differs from institute to institute. For an institute like CCMB where everything is in-house, it is easy. Maybe you can finish the project really early. But if you are working in some institute which does not have a sequencing facility, which does not have a confocal microscope, then you have to request another institute, wait for them to make a slot. So these are the places where PhDs get delayed, and and a person gets frustrated that अरे यार हो ही नहीं रहा है, हो ही नहीं रहा है. It is a really big decision. One, talking to people helps, yes, of course. But then at any cost, I don't think you can predict what will happen. That really differs day to day. It might happen that you get a good idea and you know how to effectively, efficiently finish your project. It might happen that you are just not motivated, and even it is right there. Sometimes it happens that your solution is right there in front of your eyes and still you can't see it. So these things will also, affect how is your PhD experience. Is
That's
what
very
I
true.
think right now.
Yeah.
I am not enrolled in a program.
No, no, of course, of course. And I know that if you will create a lot of impact with that. Also, because I know you as my senior and I know you as a leader, and also because you highlighted some of the challenges that you faced during this journey, would you also like to point out some challenges that your peers were facing during this time? What are some questions that nobody answers for them? What are some loops that they were stuck in? And maybe you didn't face those same struggles, but mostly all of them were struggling with some things.
I think one of the biggest problem that my peers struggled with, one, they were not aware that what kind of labs we should apply to, what kind of PIs institutes we should look for. And two, most of them I noticed were really unconfident to face an interview with somebody or even to mail a scientist. So that is now in my case, see, after a point I was like, this is a part of my routine right now. Keep on applying is a part of my routine. So after I was not scared actually to apply to CCMB because I was like, what's the worst that could happen? Nobody will respond. I'll be here in Nagpur. But most of the people of my batch were scared to even mail people in CCMB first at the first. I was like, why are you not mailing? Like, how can we mail? We don't have anything. Arre, I also did not have anything. You mail, no? How would people know that you exist? You mail, you take follow-ups. You mail people after 3 days. See, you have to be shameless. Out and open, I'm saying this. You have to be shameless. I really am. If somebody is not responding to my email after 2 days, I am already second day night. I have already scheduled a follow-up email. Okay, hi, what happened? What is the worst that will happen? Somebody will block you. उससे ज्यादा तो कुछ नहीं होगा, right? So yeah, that is one challenge that people face, that they did not, they were scared to just put out a word for themselves and do a follow-up email. They just accepted. See, most of them like did one mail and they did not get a reply, so they just accepted कि नहीं होगा. अरे you do follow-up emails. How would people know? Because see, scientists in good institutes do not have time after 2 3 days. If you send a follow-up email, most of them actually respond to follow-up emails later. Ki, yeah, I saw this email. You keep on taking chances. One. Two, people, nobody told many people that when you should start applying. So you actually apply right from the ending of second semester only, because most of the institutes have in the dissertation students scheduled for 1 or 2 years ahead. Like you have to be in the line. So I started mailing from the first week of third semester. I probably started mailing people from June last week, and October is somewhere that I had started getting replies. And you don't know the number of people that you have to mail. Probably till August first week, I was done mailing about 150 scientists. It was a part of my routine. Most of the people did not know this. See, you can either be really underconfident that I'm never gonna get an opportunity, or you are overconfident कि I'll mail 1 week before and I'll get the opportunity. This is not what happens. These people, big institutes, the big shark institutes, have people lined up for next 1 or 2 years. So you also have to mail one semester prior. So these were some of the things that many of my peers did not know, and that is how they lost the opportunity to get into a good institute. And that is something I would really want all of my juniors to know. You start applying from third semester first week. You mail scientists every day. You have to mail. I think in total, I might have mailed 200 to 250 scientists, out of which only three had replied. That is the ratio. That is the ratio of but and which is exactly why you should not stop trying. Is there anything else that I did not answer in your
I
question
hope
right
that
now?
wasn't demotivating for research enthusiasts. But no, that is very
That
true.
should not be
It
demotivating.
should
That is
not.
just
Yeah,
practical.
yeah, yeah.
See, this is speaking of demotivating. I don't want to be demotivating, but I want to tell this to all my juniors. You have to keep on trying like never before. You have to do this for dissertation, and this problem gets escalated exponentially by the time you want to apply for a PhD. So let's be honest. Let's not consider it demotivating. This is practical. This is what happens in the world, and everybody has to be ready to face it. I'm not being demotivating. This is just practical.
Wow, wow. So thank
Like,
you
I can't
for that
sugarcoat this.
actually
I really
very
can't.
eye-opening and amazing, inspirational chat. I'm sure that many people didn't know much about this. I always get questions on, how to do this, how to get internships, how to get dissertation projects in good institutes. These are some questions that people always have. So I think you did a great job with that.
And as I was saying that I'm super grateful for the seniors that I have had during my bachelor's, because this confidence of, even if being in a room full of people, and you can say I don't know but I want to learn, that kind of confidence we need at all stages of your life. No, doesn't matter which institute really you belong to, wherever you go, there's always an opening for you to get in and learn new things, and people like that actually. So that's very important to get over the imposter syndrome that everybody has, especially in science. Thank you for that.
So, out and honest, one advice about dissertation program that I would like to give to everyone, not just dissertation in general. I don't know where all they can apply this, but please let's be practical. Nothing can be sugar coated. Yes, life is not gonna be easy. You have to keep on applying. You have to go through rejections every day, and be brave enough to wake up next day and mail again. This is brutal truth that I'm gonna tell everybody. But no need to get demotivated because of that. I mailed n number of people. I never thought that I'll get into CCMB.
And being honest, right?
So
Being
you
honest
just
about
don't
what
stop
you
trying.
are and what you know, and not even
Yeah.
exaggerating that, right?
Well, you be honest. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. And bitter truth, you are not gonna get opportunities served on a plate. You have to go through n number of setbacks and rejections. So, and this will happen in the dissertation program. It will be a trailer of how you will be treated in the world ahead. So it's good to accept it and plan your strategy accordingly.
True. Amazing. So this is something that I like to ask all the guests that come on my podcast, and I am very excited to hear it from you because I have seen your undergrad days up close. With the
Mhm.
experience that you now have, if you were to relive your undergrad days, what would you do differently, if at all you would?
With the experience that I have right now, you said, no?
That's right, yes.
Okay, I would have thought of the projects that I used to do in undergraduation. Those projects would have been really good if I had this experience at first. Because again, I would have thought of the problems differently. I would have tried to come to if see if this technique is not working, let's try that. I would have been used to reading a lot of scientific articles and in a different way. So when you are reading them in undergrad, you are most of the people are not able to make sense of it. But getting a see if with this experience, I would have had a way clearer picture of my undergrad days. And I would have been really efficient actually. Whatever time I might have wasted, whatever hours that I might have wasted, I would have utilized them really efficiently.
Amazing, Ashlisha. Thank you so much for that conversation. I think that it would be very, very helpful for people who are listening to this, especially our own peers, in fact. They would be very happy
Oh
to know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So see, I always say this, Srishti, you are doing a great job. People really need to know. So this is
Oh,
you have no idea how much this would contribute to their life. If I had somebody at my time who would make a podcast on dissertation, oh my God, life would have been so easy.
yeah. Well, I really hope that it reaches as many people as possible because I have faced all of these problems myself. So I know that these are actual problems that need to be solved.
Really. And you are aware of that thing, you are aware of the problem that needs to be solved is something that makes me respect you a lot. Knowing, being aware of the problem and actually trying to do something about it, very few people do it, very few people. And you firsthand know how difficult it is to reach out to people in these initial days, and you are still motivated, you are still looking for other you're still look I'm pretty sure by now you know who's going to be your next podcast guest. This is because I can understand the efforts that go behind it every day, and how difficult it is not to get that much attention, because you have a purpose, you want this to reach to people and many people don't know, yet you are motivated, yet you are trying. God, really makes me respect you a lot.
Oh my God. We should get off record. You're flattering me a lot.
That was all for today's episode. As I said, I'm sure you'll take something away from this, but I do not want to take things for granted. So I will request you all to keep sending in feedback, suggestions on any kind of improvements that you would like to see in our upcoming episodes. I'll see you soon with another amazing story in science. Thanks for tuning in to the Purple Science Podcast. We share stories every Tuesday. Our inbox is always open for your feedback, and our DMs across all social media platforms, linked in the description, are open to your unique stories. If you know somebody who might benefit from this, do share the podcast with them and spread the joy of learning.